Hi everyone, my name's Search Donkey and today we're back on the RTS project for the second time actually today. Um, so sorry if things look a little bit different, not how they started, because I actually managed to go back and delete some bits that we needed. So some things, for example in the enemy step especially, may look a little bit different, like this bit. Don't worry, it's the same kind of thing. I'm not sure if it might just be ordering and stuff, but it does the same thing. So, we can just imagine this is the same as what it was before. But anyway, in this video we're going to be making the smarter and also going to be improving our movement slightly by adding a little pause in between, because at the moment it's kind of just wandering around randomly. We're going to change that so it chases the player a little bit. And also you've got a little pause in between each movement, so he's not just going back and forth like he was there. So to do that we're going to first need an alarm. I did actually find out that alarms do work in GameMaker 2, so we can do that quite nicely. So here in the if statement we're going to add another case, and that's going to be if the alarm is equal to -1. So if the alarm is ticked right down to be 0, or effectively 0, then we're going to run this, and then we're going to set the alarm at the very bottom to equal the room speed. This basically means that it'll only run this every second, which is what room speed stands for, which is 1 second in the room. And that means that the movement, if we run it, should be a little bit nicer. Yeah, there you go. It kind of stops every so often, contemplates, and then goes back. So that's quite nice. What we're going to do though is add another kind of mode to our AI, so to speak, because we want this chase aspect to be there. So the first thing we're going to do is go into scripts and add a group. The reason we're doing this is because things start to get quite messy, and I'll go back into the thing and explain. Anyway, we'll call it AI for the time being. It doesn't really matter what you call it. If you come back into the enemy, you don't have to, but this is just for reference. The reason why I like to put these into scripts is because they start to get quite messy. This one's quite neat because it's quite simple. The chase one will be quite neat because it's quite simple. As soon as you start adding complex AIs, you start to get quite messy quite quickly. So what I like to do a lot of the time is keep this. Like, this code is generic, so this code works for every single scenario. It's just the movement code, right? This code at the bottom is also generic. That's just the stopping it from going out of bounds code, right? This code is going to change depending on what state we're in. So what we're going to do is put this into a... Then we can switch scripts, and it's much easier to see what we're actually doing. And I'll go into that in the next video, I think. But for the moment, we're just going to be making these scripts ready to use. So you can copy this bit, or whatever yours looks like. We'll add a new script here. We'll go call it script state passive, because at this state nothing's happening. It's just completely just wandering around, waiting for the player to come near, or for him to wandering to the player. That's the other alternative. So that's that. If we're to run this now though, I made the mistake earlier of running it, and these weren't defined. An X and NY are defined because we're running it directly from here, or we will be running it from here. However, tile width and tile height are not actually defined ever here. They're defined at the top, but they're defined with var, which means that they're temporary variables, so they don't get passed into the script, which is always a good practice, but for this case we're going to want to pass them in anyway. And an easy way of checking if that's right is if you come to here, without these two lines, I'll just comment them out, should change it, should update, there we go. You can see the color coding is different between the tile width and the tile width there is different. So GameMaker uses yellow for temporary variables and these kind of purple blue color for permanent variables. So you can mess around with them, or local variables you should call them. And yeah, once you got the color coding right, it should match up exactly like that. So that should work now. We can now replace this with script state passive and run that, and now that will work exactly the same. We won't notice any like notable difference because it's just running the same code but from a script. And from a outsider's point of view, this just generally is already looking a lot nicer. You know, we see here this is a script that is running a passive state. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? And as soon as we start adding more complex states in, we can name them quite well, and it just means that we have our if statements here. So maybe like if player distance is less than 100, then we chase, and if not, we do the passive state. So there's one way of looking at it, and then this is again quite nice and readable. So anyway, we'd better go on and actually make our chase script, and you'll be surprised how quickly we actually do it. So you'll call it again script state chase, so that makes sense. And this is why I said we can be quite efficient with this, because we can copy this to start with. A lot of it will follow this kind of pattern because we're still going to need this, and we're still going to need this kind of backbone here. We just don't need this bit in the middle. That's the actual state movement. So we can get rid of that. This is all going to be the same though. We're only going to want to move once we've reached our destination, you know, etc, etc, and we're only going to want to move every step or every second. So we can close that one down for the moment. And make sure you're working in the chase script now, especially. So the next thing we're going to do is find our object unit. Now, maybe asking why are we looking at the object unit? That doesn't seem very useful. But actually, if you think about what we're going to be doing in the chase script, we're going to be moving through our tiles. We can't move outside our tiles, of course. And we're going to be moving towards the player. And what does that kind of sound like? Well, it sounds like our player movement, because our player movement is moving the player towards the mouse. In this case, we're just moving the enemy towards the player. So it's the same thing, although we're going to want to change the mouse coordinates to be equal to the player's coordinates. Okay. So if we go down, I believe it's in the controller actually. The controller step. No, not step. Right pressed. So this code here is exactly what we need. This does the whole thing for you. In fact, we can copy the whole thing and paste into here and make sure it's tabbed along. That's the other thing. And then we just need to read through this just to check that this makes sense, because a lot of it probably won't, and a lot of it probably we don't need, so we can get rid of it. So if we start here, var mouse x and mouse y, we talked about how we're going to map them onto the object player, or the player object, the object basically units x and y coordinates. So we can do that quite easily. Oops, just y. If we move now on to this next bit, tower height and tower width, well, we've already set them there, so we don't really need them again. Mouse grid x, mouse grid y, important if we're going to be moving through the tiles, so we kind of need to keep them. For loop, what does the for loop actually do? Well, it loops through our units and you know, does it with each unit. Well, we don't need to bother about that because each enemy is going to run independent from each other, so this isn't going to matter. The debug message therefore is not important, and we don't need any widths because we're running the script from within our enemy anyway, so adding a width would just be irrelevant because this is all running from this object, exactly as if we'd copied this and paste this in here, it'd do the same thing. So that's kind of that there. We stripped it down a little bit, but you can see how we've quite easily made a completely new state just by using the code we've already got. So if we were to change that to chase and just run it, we should be able to see that the enemy chases. If we move over here, yep, There you go. It doesn't seem to be like, this is the problem I had earlier, it doesn't seem to be entirely confined within the boxes. So we might need to work on that one a little bit. It may be to do with the movement, but yeah, we'll leave it for the time being, I think. One thing I did want to do though quickly, which I was going to do at the start but I actually forgot, was going to move the enemy to be further away, because at the moment it spawns right on top of you. So the way we're going to do this is add 41, because that is our tile width, and we're going to times it by like 5, and here we're going to add 22 because that's the height, and times it by about 10. And the reason we do this is so that it's still in the center of the tile. And now if we move this, it should spawn somewhere down here. There you go. It's definitely not moving with the tiles, so we do need to work on that a little bit. If we move it here, it will move with the tiles and it will stop every so often. I know it should do. It seems to be just the diagonal. But yeah, we'll work on that in the next video. There's at least something to work on, and we'll work on messing around with these states so they don't just run all the time. Maybe some sort of vicinity, and yeah, that should work quite nicely. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you like this video, remember to like, subscribe, whatever you guys want to do, and I will talk to you in the next one.